All right, I want to bring in for a little perspective right now Marick Masters. He's a Wayne State University business professor who has been helping us kind of walk through this entire strike as we're at day 15. Marick, it's good to see you. In listening to what Shawn Fain just said and then calling out of these next two assembly plants, what do you make of this latest announcement?
Well, I would look at it as a very measured step that incrementally increases the pressure on two companies, which must reflect that overall he is relatively pleased with the progress in the negotiations. Otherwise, I think he would have taken more extreme action. The fact that there hasn't been as much progress at Ford and GM as he would like prompted him to nudge the parties a bit. And this is not a crippling blow, but it does ramp up the pressure. And I think it is also noteworthy that he is again being asymmetrical in his approach and differentiating between the companies. He obviously was pleased that he got a proposal that was more forthcoming from Stellantis. That perhaps reflects more movement than has been apparent in those negotiations so far. So I view this as overall a relatively positive development in that the parties may be nearing closure on some of the issues, and it may just take a nudge or two here and there to bring them to a.
Yeah, it was interesting, Marick, that this actually started late this morning because usually it's around 10 o'clock when Shawn Fain comes on. But he said that there was some last-minute flurry of activity, and that probably lends to what you're talking about, that while this is a little bit more of a turn of the crank, it's not a devastating blow, but they could be getting closer.
Well, I think so. I mean, deadlines force people to make decisions. And that's one of the strategies you use in negotiation. And that you set deadlines and you say, look, we're going to ramp up the pressure at this deadline. And if you don't become more forthcoming, you're going to pay the consequences. And I think parties naturally wait until the last minute to get their act together or to come up with what they think is a realistic proposal and then share it. And that can be the type of developments that make it possible for Shawn Fain to discriminate against the companies in the basis of how he's striking them.
I want to ask you, Marick, just kind of your perspective on everything that's happened this week with the president visiting here on Tuesday. Of course, former President Trump had more of a campaign stop and announcement here on Wednesday, but the focus on the UAW strike and really bringing the conversation about striking workers, what workers really want, what the middle class really means to the mainstream and what people are focusing on.
Well, I'm old enough to remember strikes from a long time ago, 1970, and even have read considerable amount about strikes, even though I was alive at the time, but very young, in 1959 in the steel industry, and these captured the nation's attention. This is the same thing. The 1970 strike was a GM strike by the auto workers. We are now in a situation in which we're paying more attention to labor than we have for quite some time. And I think that Shawn Fain is the reason for that. He's brought to the forefront the issue of the working class, the struggle between labor and capital, and also the need for a fair and just transition in the pursuit of electrical vehicles. And that brings us to the presidential visits. I mean, the notion that presidents are neutral in labor management relation is a facade. They have always taken sides. Most likely they are on one side or the other most of the time, but they're often forced because of national emergencies to take the side of management and put a stop to strikes. The president has the authority to do that. I would doubt that he would exercise it except under dire circumstances in this case, but he may be called upon to bring the parties together. And I actually take a little bit of an unconventional view on this. People say that, well, he can't be neutral and therefore he can't mediate a settlement, even if it's through jawboning. I think that he can. I think that he can go to the union and say, look, I stood with you, but now's the time to bring things to a close. And I'd like to see a settlement. And that would only happen if things got really beyond what they are right now. Presidents generally like for the parties to settle things themselves, but they will get involved and they do have preferences.
And one thing also, and you pointed out that we're paying attention more to labor and what is fair than we have in a very long time. And we see that a strike vote has been authorized for Vegas hospitality workers, and they're also talking about casino workers here in Detroit and other, places around the country. Is this also partially inspired by what we're seeing coming from the UAW?
Oh, I think they are all interconnected. It's almost like a contagion effect, and they feed off each other. And people saw what UPS did with the Teamsters and what the Teamsters were able to get. They saw what the unions, the pilots, have been able to do with the airlines, and they've also seen what the UAW was able to do with John Deere a while ago. So all these things point in the direction of workers getting higher wages, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with the writers, who are apparently near a settlement with the the Alliance of Motion Picture Producers. So there's a lot going on right now, and I think what workers are trying to do through their unions is apply more pressure to address what they consider to be decades of stagnating wages and what they view as declining standards of living. And I think the video that you showed before this with the rap singers talking about, the plight of the worker, I think illustrates that point very nicely.
All right, Marick Masters, Wayne State University business professor. Thanks so much for joining me. It's great to see you. Appreciate the perspective. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you very much. Take care. Have a good day.
All right, you too. And just to recap, the UAW is asking 7,000 more workers to walk off the job today at noon at the Ford Chicago Assembly. They're the ones that make the Ford Explorers and the Lincoln Aviators, and also the GM Lansing Delta Township Assembly. They make the Buick Enclave and the Chevy Traverse. And so this adds up to about 25,000 total UAW workers who are now off the job in this day 15 of the UAW strike. We're going to have continuing coverage for you, of course, here on Local 4 at noon, and then streaming live on the Daily Plus, live with me from 12:30 to 1:30 today, and of course, final wrap-ups on Local 4 News at 4, 5, and 6. That's the very latest from Local 4 Newsroom. I'm Christy McDonald. Thanks so much for joining me this morning. We will see you at noon. Take care.